top of mind is a lightning talk from Sam. Those who don't know Sam, Sam is you will learn a little bit more about him, and then we will do a deep dive into our product development process. Ali will take that over and talk a little bit about how we build features, how we prioritize things. And then the last thing is going to open up the floor for Q&A with the ODK team. We actually have a bunch of folks on the team. We've got Shimon and Dominica from the QA team, Kathleen from the central team. Ellen's going to be here shortly. So a lot of folks are going to sort of help answer your questions. But before we get into that, I wanted to welcome and introduce Sam Woodcock. Sam works at HOT, which is the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and they've been using ODK in their Field Mapping and Tasking Manager, FMTM. And that's a tool that really helps folks who are doing mapping coordinate and streamline communication among field teams. Sam will describe some of the work that their experience basically and lessons learned contributing code to ODK. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Sam, who has the coolest profile picture in the world with those sunglasses. And so I'll stop sharing my screen, and Sam, you can start sharing.
They're actually AR glasses. Actually, I was coding at the time.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Share.
Next level, Sam.
Yeah. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, as already said, yeah, I'm Sam. I'm the tech lead for Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. Always fun to say. We basically use tech for preparedness and disaster response for humanitarian things. So one thing that we're trying to do at heart is create a entire end-to-end mapping workflow. And what that means is trying to allow communities around the world who don't really have great maps to use to start from nothing and have a great digital map. So as part of this workflow, ODK comes into it. But at the start, we need to collect base imagery. So we have a tool called Drone Tasking Manager to coordinate collection of drone imagery. Then we need to digitize features. So many of you may have heard of HOT before because of the tasking manager. So this was the tool that kind of put HOT on the map, you could say. And this is to, as I say, digitize based on aerial imagery or satellite imagery, map your buildings, map your roads, and so on. But then the next stage in that is the actual field mapping. So you need to add informative tags to your map features. So, it's all well and good having, all of your building geometries in a city, but you need to know this is a school, this is a health center, maybe things like how many people are in the building during the day, what's it made from, all of these useful features. So OpenStreetMap can record all of these features. So this is kind of one of the modes that we have for field mapping, using data from OpenStreetMap and enhancing that. We can also work outside of OpenStreetMap. That's another thing. So we have a tool called the Field Mapping Tasking Manager to help facilitate this. And it works in the same way as Tasking Manager. It's basically a tool to take a project area that you have and subdivide into smaller chunks, just little tasks that individuals can go out and map in a reasonable time frame. So as you can see, like we tried to split on things like roads and rivers and make the life of the mapper easier in the field. But okay, yeah. So where do we use ODK in this? ODK is clearly the best tool for field data collection. We're not trying to replace that in any way. FMTM is purely a coordination layer on top of ODK. So we can help with the coordination amongst teams. So they know, okay, I'm currently mapping this area. So, someone next door is mapping this task area. Within each task area, then we use ODK Forms and ODK Collect and ODK Central to actually collect the form data. So the first thing that, as part of the workflow, a lot of this is obviously handled by like a project manager. I showed you like the page that a mapper would see when they're out mapping the field, but you actually need to create these projects. Yeah, I won't go through this now, but as part of the workflow, the project manager can upload a XLS form, or they can select a pre-existing like curated XLS form that we provide. And then on top of that, we upload geometries or features either from custom ones that the user provides or ones extracted from OpenStreetMap. And we make ODK entities from these features. So we used to do this actually via a XLS registration form. Now we do this via the ODK Central API. And we create an entity, in this case, called features, that has various properties that we can use and track going forward. Some of these are specific to OpenStreetMap, for those that may have used OpenStreetMap, but the main one that we need to like track the mapping progress is the status field. On each entity, we have the status field that it basically says this is either ready for mapping, it's currently being mapped, it's completed mapping, or it's a bad feature and can't be mapped. So once we have these entities, so we have the entities and we have the custom XLS form the user provides. Just to open up this, we inject a couple of fields that are required for FMTM to work. So the user's already provided their form with their actual survey questions, but here we basically just append all of these additional fields to the top of their form. And obviously the main one that we need to use here is the select one from file. And we're selecting features.csv, which is referencing the entities list called features. So I don't need to go through all of these things, but this is, talked about the status, yes, the track the status and so on. The key thing in here is the entities tab, right? Where again, we have the list name features, and we can do things like create a new entity if one doesn't exist, or update existing entities if one is selected in the form. But something that you can see here is we have a label with quite convoluted logic here, but this is how we set the status. So we inform the user of the mapping progress. In ODK Collect, if the user clicks on a building, they can see one of these icons appended to the label of the entity. It'll either be a padlock to show that it's currently being mapped and shouldn't be mapped by someone else, a tick to say that it's complete, and so on, or a cross to say it failed. So you can actually see this reflected in ODK Central here, where we have the icon appended at the start of all of the features that have been mapped. So at the end of the project creation flow, we have each building or feature represented by an ODK entity, the status of the entity, which tracks its mapping status, and then each entity is subdivided by their FMTM task ID, which is also an entity property, but that allows us to keep them in their individual task area when we're interacting with the entities. So as part of this whole workflow, we need users to go into the field and walk around basically and see themselves on the map with geolocation and go to a task area, click on a building and map. To facilitate that, we need some sort of base map. So we have a functionality to, in most cases, in most of our use cases, use a custom, like say drone imagery base map, or maybe a satellite imagery provider. But we need to generate the base map for this task area and output a MB tiles output. Once we generate this, then users can then just go to FMTM, download the MB tiles, and then load this into ODK Collect. But as many of you probably use ODK for a long time, in the past, this was a bit more of a convoluted process. You had to load onto your device by plugging it into your computer, putting it into the right place. So something that we worked with the ODK team on, like, first of all, kind of making the suggestion on the forums. So got some great feedback to this, loads of contribution from the community. That was very useful. nailing down exactly how we should solve this problem. And as a result, Nishan actually, he made this issue, who we work with closely. He works for NAXA in Nepal, very close collaborator. He made the initial stab at solving this problem, made a PR, and this was later picked up by ODK and completed. But yeah, basically, this worked really well because we had this communication channel through the forum to get community feedback, but then also through GitHub, the developers, can just talk about the specific technical details, how to solve the problem. Callum was really great actually here at breaking down the problems into very easily solvable chunks. So yeah, in general, it just facilitated the solving this problem. It was a lot easier. So yeah, basically that's all I have to say. Well, this is just it's been a great experience in general, like collaborating with the ODK developers, always very friendly and open to suggestions. We're reasonably active on the forum, talking about different issues other than this, and we have lots of other requirements we would like in FMTM as well. But yeah, we're just very pleased to have such a welcoming and great community that we're part of. So yeah, that's it from me.
Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
Of course, I'm on mute. Why wouldn't I? Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing. Ali, can you throw up the slide for the Q&A session? We want to open up the floor for a few minutes of Q&A to make sure that if you have questions for Sam or about the process, you can get a chance to ask. Before I do, I want to kind of summarize a little bit. So, Sam, my understanding is that you built a coordination layer where people can log into a website, they can go to a place, outline places that need to be mapped, and then assign those mapping tasks to workers who can then fill out the data, and that all floats back to your system. Can you give me a sense of like how many people are using this tool currently, and what your plans, to grow it are?
Yeah, so it ebbs and flows really with mapping campaigns that are going on. But currently, there's a team in Monrovia that's doing a mapping campaign with maybe I think about 20 enumerators are doing that. So that's sort of the typical range. It's like 20 enumerators are going at one time, mapping collaboratively, and then it stops at the end of the campaign. Obviously we're trying to get a lot more of our hubs at HOT involved. So like the Latin American hub, Asia Pacific, but this is growing over time basically. But the user base is quite small at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. I see Dan has his hand raised. So Dan.
Have you seen any uptake outside of HOT OSM by other organizations or groups that have used it like without your direct assistance?
Yeah, I think it's not really, it's not the most intuitive thing, like in terms of documentation and like, the use case and everything from the start. So I can kind of see why, like, yeah, we haven't really had much external kind of usage, you could say. We are doing a project in a couple of months for the Nepalese government. So through our contacts at NAXA, they've definitely been pushing it in Nepal, and we're planning to eventually roll that out to do a census in Nepal. The Ecuadorian government has also reached out, so quite a good use case, incidentally, outside of humanitarian work is doing census data collection for an entire country. So Ecuador may use FMTM for their next census. Yeah, there's some users here and there, let's just say.
All great things have to start somewhere.
Exactly.
I'm looking at my screen here and make sure anybody else have a question. You can either raise your hand or drop it in the chat. The ODK team, you are also allowed to ask questions.
It's really nice to see to see this demo and see like, oh, how the entities are playing into this and the base maps, like seeing all the new features that have been added, like come together in this project that you're working on. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great to use entities. I mean, at the start, we had a very convoluted flow of having a XIS form per task. But this wasn't sustainable really. The future entities just solve that problem straight off. We now just have a project, one entity list per project, but then we can just subdivide based on the task ID property of each entity.
Very cool. Last chance for questions before we turn things over to Ali. Oh, I see it. I see Joseph. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. My question, I wanted to know whether you've possibly faced challenges with restricted areas. Working with the geo coordinates, sometimes you find like restricted. Okay, it happens with GPS, like for example, near military installations, and you find some of the places are restricted. You cannot capture a certain geo information that you need. Have you faced such a challenge or a similar challenge, and how possible have you been able to overcome that if you have faced one? Thank you.
So what's the question? That there's some areas that we're unable to map basically because they're restricted, and how do we handle those restrictions? Right. So that's, I guess, on the level of like the project manager who's setting up the project. They can specify which specific buildings or roads or features they want to map, and can omit, say there's sensitive, buildings or areas that they can't go. They would just not include the buildings for the enumerators to go and map. So.
Thank you for that. I see a question from Tyler in the chat asking, are the icons that Sam has used status updates or just an emoji? I can answer this one. They are just emojis. And so the hot team is very cleverly using the label of an entity as a way to sort of communicate status. And so when you have logic in there that changes whether or not it's like a check mark or a cross, those updates show up in the list of entities or in the data in Central, and they also can show up on the in the interface in ODK Collect for enumerators. So it's a very nice, lightweight way of changing status icons, and you can use any emoji. And Andrew's mentioning that he also uses emojis in a similar manner because it'll render on nicely on every platform. So yeah, it's a very clever use of instance naming as a way to communicate state. So nicely done, Sam and team. I see here in the chat, Elena's mentioning that GPS can't capture it because the signal is jammed. I believe that is what Joseph is saying, that yes, like around military installations, sometimes around airports, you cannot, GPS won't work.
Well, the great thing with entities-based setup is that we have the geometries predefined, right, for the entities. So it is great if we can get a geolocation of the user just to verify that they're maybe next to the building that they're mapping, but it's not an essential part of the mapping flow. They in the field, they just select the building that they think they're next to and map that. This is only really crucial when they're mapping a new building. And in that case, they may need to take a geo point and know exactly where they are.
Fantastic. Well, I think, again, thank you so much, Sam, for presenting and sharing your work. Yeah, it's really, like Kathleen said, it's fantastic to see all the effort that the team has been putting. From a selfish perspective, it's great to see that all the effort we put into like being able to preload entities, add geometries, the offline mapping, all those features are actually in the hands of folks and being used. So congratulations on your success. I'm going to turn things over to Ali, who's going to talk a little bit about what a lot of you folks wanted to hear about also, which is just like how we decide what things get built and when. So Ali, the floor is yours. I'm really interested in learning from Ali how we decide how things get built.
Amazing. Okay, yes. So we did a poll
on the forum with all of the insiders as well as on LinkedIn. We wanted to hear, what do you want to know about our product development process? When we did the insiders survey, this was one of the top things that people wanted to know about. So what we heard from the voting was, yeah, the roadmap, prioritization, our goals and strategy, and then what does it look like to build a feature end to end? And so we have the whole team here as well. So add questions to the chat as I'm going through. We'll pause for questions, but we got kind of similar results on the forum and LinkedIn. So what we're going to try to do is squeeze in all three topics and give kind of an overview, and then we can always dive deeper in future calls, or we could share more on the forum. And so we just want to make sure we give an overview of how it all works. So we'll start with prioritization and the roadmap. And again, please add questions to the chat as I'm going through. So we thought we would start with our mission, probably the reason why a lot of you are here. The goal is to help researchers and field teams collect data that matters, no matter where it is, to make the world a better place. And so our mission is centered around users, around the community, all of you. We practice user-centered design. We're always thinking about, who are we designing for? What problem are we solving? What do we want to achieve? Why should we build it? Just because you can build it doesn't mean you should always. There are lots of great solutions out there in the wider ecosystem. So we're always trying to make sure that we have very clear goals around what we're trying to achieve, and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, and really being intentional and thoughtful around that process. So all of that feeds into our product roadmap. We have some new folks on the call. This is probably familiar to quite a few of you, but if you haven't seen it before, this is public. We keep it updated. We categorize it into now, next, and later across all of the different tools. And we're regularly coming back to this and making sure it reflects our learnings, what we're hearing from you all. So you might be wondering, how do we decide what goes on this great roadmap? There are a few different factors and different decision inputs that we consider. So first is, how are people using ODK? We're constantly doing user research, looking at our usage analytics, understanding what our stakeholder priorities are, our customers, our partners, looking at the broader landscape, understanding maybe how technology is shifting, how we're adapting, and how all of that can best achieve our organizational goals of building a sustainable organization that has a huge impact. And so all of that kind of feeds into this prioritization. And as you can see here, we're not just building great features or just writing code. There's also specs, translation, docs, quality assurance, cross-product interactions, thinking about how it works end to end so that there's a seamless user experience. So there's a lot of things that we're prioritizing, and we'll get into how we actually build out some of those features and that kind of process behind it in the next section. This is kind of how it all fits together. So what makes a good feature? For us, it delivers value to a large group of users. So this is really important. We want to see lots of people engaging. Sam gave a great example with the MP tiles. Lots of people got involved in that. We had lots of iteration, lots of back and forth and feedback. And so that was really helpful to inform our process, understanding what problem we're trying to solve. So we always want to be really aware, is this a shiny new thing, like something that's quite attractive, looks good, but might not be grounded in user feedback or adding a lot of user value? Or if it's a squeaky wheel, maybe it's only an issue for a few vocal folks on the forum, and it might only have a very specific need that doesn't apply to the wider community. We have to kind of think about those trade-offs and make sure it's delivering value to as many users as possible. So we want to make sure it's tightly scoped with a strong understanding of the problem. It's tied to the roadmap and our strategic goals, and it helps with our long-term sustainability of the project. So most helpful contributions, cloud subscriptions, feedback, bug reports, testing, translation, documentation. This is what really helps us as a team. In order to keep track of all of the feedback and what we're hearing from all of you, we have a research library. This is private right now, but it's organized along the entire end-to-end user journey, all the way from thinking about using ODK to reviewing your analysis, extracting your data. And so we're always listening, not in a creepy way, but we're just like always listening for feedback, hearing what problems people are talking about. We're tracking them. We're trying to document those reoccurring themes and patterns and pain points that we're hearing. And that feeds into our prioritization. So if we're seeing it come up time and time again, we start to consider, okay, when do we want to prioritize this? Is this something that we have to set up the foundation for? How will we sequence it? So we will hear you. We do document it, and it is captured. So maybe I will pause here. I know there's lots of questions in the chat. I'll pause. Does anybody have any questions? Maybe I'll look to Yao and Alen.
Wolf has a couple of questions. One is who exactly decides about the final priority? I would say it's like mostly Alen, myself, and Ali who decides the final priority. And then how do we systematically evaluate the forum discussions? We are always on the forum. Like if you look at the analytics on the forum, which are public, we're always on the forum and listening. I wouldn't say it's like a systematic, it's not like, we look at every post and then we categorize it. The forum gives us a sense of how the broader communities is interacting with the tools. So we look at that. And again, it feeds into a wider picture. We cannot just listen to the forum because the forum has a very narrow subset of those various stakeholders that we talked about.
Yeah, this one. Okay. So maybe we'll dig in, if that's all the questions so far, we'll dig into our product development process. So digging into how this actually works. So kind of that section 3 over here. So all of those decision inputs, like I was saying, thinking about feedback, what's on the form, our partners, stakeholders, they kind of fall into different priority buckets. And here we have new features, showstoppers, continuous improvement, and impactful tweaks. So they tend to fall into these 4 areas. So for new features, this tends to take a while because we're starting something new. There's lots of research. There's lots of assumptions we need to test, designing, testing, building kind of that iterative loop. A showstopper might be really pressing user feedback that we've received and we need to change something straight away. Continuous improvement might be improving the UX, UI, performance, making ODK faster, and then a small impactful tweak. It might be a quick win, something that we can incorporate into a release. It's going to add a lot of value. And so these are kind of the different areas that we're thinking about. Of course, we're always prioritizing bugs in every release as well. And if there's Android updates, those types of things. But these are generally the kind of 4 areas. So I'll go into new features and I'll give 2 examples of how that works. So when I talk about like new feature development, I'm kind of referring to that build, measure, learn loop. If you've kind of seen variations of this diagram before, everyone on the team plays a role in this process. And that's what's great about having a multidisciplinary team, because everyone is really involved, design, QA, involved from the very start all the way to the end. Our QA team, they're thinking about manual QA, testing, exploratory testing, test-driven design. And if you do have questions for them, they're on the call as well if you want to ask about that a little bit more. But we want to learn based on the needs. We want to test those risky assumptions, test with prototypes. There's a lot of different ways to validate or invalidate our assumptions. Then we kind of design it, build, get it out there, get user feedback, and then measure and iterate from there. So that's kind of the framework for developing a new feature. So I'll give 2 examples. The first is a simple, well, a little bit more simple of a feature is the counter widget, which a lot of you fed into that process. So even simple features take some time. We still need to think about the UX, UI. We need to test it rigorously. We need to build it. This one was really tightly scoped. Question types or widgets are tend to be a little bit more tightly scoped because it doesn't require a ton of coordination across all of the teams. But it started with a problem, user feedback on the form. In this case, this idea was, shared out that counting things manually is really difficult and prone to errors. We've heard this in customer feedback as well. Florian's idea is kind of tied. There's always links to other kind of ideas that are floating around on the form. And we knew it could kind of fit into our next collect release. So from there, we did some exploration. These are just a few different ideas that we were thinking through. The first one was way too big, not great for a reduced or smaller screen size. The second one, we were playing around with like the primary buttons. We didn't want to influence like what's good or bad with the primary blue, and then changing up the orientation and the layout on the third option, but we didn't want any accidental tapping. And we really need to think about that with low cost devices. And that's something we're always thinking about. So where we're at today, we built it out, it's tested. We're going to release it soon, and we want to get your feedback. We've already heard from a few of you some other ideas, ways we can build on top of it, and maybe get us closer to that grid view that Florian was talking about. And we'll just keep iterating. And so that's an example of a smaller feature. We're kind of starting and then kind of building it all the way through. The second example is offline entities. So a little bit more complex than the counter widget. There's a lot to consider. We started the offline entities earlier this year. There's lots of edge cases for us to consider in the way fails in a way that's like recoverable, thinking about ways that it could go wrong, lots of testing of this feature. We need to consider how it impacts the wider ecosystem. This is something that we're always thinking about, and with everything that we do, thinking about how it impacts Kobo, Ona, others. And we need to think about how it sequences across the different teams. And that's a little bit tricky. So here's kind of a diagram to show how it all kind of fits together. So we have collect, central, web forms, the form spec, all the development team, and then we have kind of these cross-cutting roles as well. And we work with each of the team to design and develop, thinking about the QA, DevOps, user research, and it's kind of all the way through, not just kind of at the end, but that kind of just shows all the different streams of work and thinking about how we might sequence something. And we think it's really important to have these cross-cutting roles all the way through from the beginning. So if Dominica can't easily test a feature, then it might be unreliable. So we want to think about that. And if Yao can't talk about how that feature works, how to use it, how that links to our learning resources, we need to think about, will it be widely used? How will people learn about it? And so having a small agile team really helps us make that possible. So this gives you a little bit about the composition, how the kind of teams are structured. And that helps us with this multi-stream coordination for thinking like of things like offline entities and how we're going to sequence up the work across collect, central, the spec, because we want to release iteratively. We want to release as often as possible, but we also we don't want to move fast and break things. We want to be really careful and think about the community, all the different use cases. And Alen posted about this in more detail on the forum yesterday. So if you're interested in learning more about the sequence, you can read more about it there. We'll pop that in the chat if you want to see more there. And so where that it leaves us today, we're going to keep iterating, building out entities and offline support. It's a big complex feature. And the UI here, it looks really simple for the beta, but soon you won't see this. And it's a multi-year project, so it's going to keep expanding as we learn new different requirements, pain points, things we want to build out. And that kind of requires a lot of coordination and team bandwidth. So if you do want to see outside of the roadmap, which is really kind of those big challenges that we're working on and outcomes we're working towards, we also have the different user stories if you want to look at the entity functionality. So it's a little bit more of that detail. We'll put that link in the chat afterwards as well if you want to have a look there. And maybe I will pause here before we jump into our goals and strategy for the next 6 months and look at the chat. Yeah, Ellen, there's a lot in here. Is there anything we want to jump into specifically?
I think there's some good feedback. People are enjoying the counter widget, which is coming, a small feature. I guess there's a question about, if the research bank can be made public. I've touched on, like, it's really a pretty raw and sensitive. There's like stuff from all over the place, and it might not be the best things to communicate to folks. But I guess it's something. Ali, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, we would probably, we'd have to think about, because there's feedback coming from all different channels. So we'd have to think about ways of opening that up, but it's good feedback and we'll definitely think about it. We can share more about it on the forum as well if you want to learn more about that. Does anyone have any questions about how we build things? I can also go into some of the other buckets, so like continuous improvement or showstoppers. Or we could jump right into the goals and strategy for the next 6 months.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, Ali, you can drive the slides.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, before I jump into that, one thing that I want to point out really about the offline entities stuff is that, like, yeah, it is for users, it's not like a feature, or rather like it will just be there and will just work. And there won't be like a button that you can turn on and off or whatever. But it's just like way more work. In fact, almost all our biggest features take a lot of work, but don't show up. It just happens. Whereas the counter widget, you can see it right away. It's like, oh, that's amazing. But that took way little work. I think it's really funny. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about our organizational strategy and goals for the next couple of next 6 months. So, Ali, can you jump to that slide? Or am I looking at the wrong?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the wrong side. Yeah, so 5 things that we really want to be focused on in the next couple of months. The first is just naturally entities. It's what people have been asking for, people want. It's what the team is primarily focused on. So we want to get offline entities out of the door and the initial features out so folks can use it, get value out of it, provide us the feedback that we need to sort of make more decisions around it. So that's been our primary focus and will continue to be so. We have a new web forms engine that will be replacing Enketo. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we want to drive the adoption of that and the migration, getting people to move from Enketo to web forms and ensuring that that experience is like fast, secure, beautiful, customizable, and all those kinds of things. So that's another big priority. Sadik and Trevor are working on that. We do want to reduce barriers to using ODK. And what I mean by barriers are just barriers to getting started. So you will notice that we've invested a lot in just learning resources to reduce barriers. So things like tutorials and videos, we're investing a lot in those. Another thing we're investing in is just like lowering the bar in general. So we don't want to be a product that requires training or certification, right? I always joke that like nobody got certified to show up on the Zoom call, right? You didn't go to a class and they teach you how to use Zoom. We don't want to be that. We want to be a platform where you can just like use it. And so part of that is just improving the UI and the user experience and the user interface. Part of that is just providing more resources. So we want to continue to do that. Cloud adoption is something that we want to do. So ODK Cloud is what helps make the project be financially sustainable. It's what pays for the team. And so we want to make sure that we are increasing folks' use of that for those folks who want to use it, want to make it easier for people to use. And then the last thing is why we do these insider calls. ODK is ultimately a community project, right? So that's why we have the insiders program, we have the newsletters, we spend so much time writing user-friendly release notes. We're not like, I'm going to throw Google under the bus here. They're big boys, they can handle it. The release notes don't say just like bug fixes and performance improvements like every other app, right? We spend actually a lot of time thinking about how we communicate these new features to folks. We think that just helps with the community vibe, and so we want to continue doing that. If you want to, yeah, so that's going to be our priorities for the next couple of months. Let me go to the next slide here. Web forms. I talk a little bit about web forms. So we're migrating, we maintain Enketo, which is the web forms that exists in ODK today. Enketo is also used in Kobo and Ona. So we're migrating from Enketo to our new ODK Web Forms engine. The reason we're doing that is that it lets us just build more features, make the platform more usable and faster for folks who are doing self-report or bringing their own devices. We think web forms could be transformative as far as the ecosystem. We have a plan there for releasing it iteratively, and hopefully one of the team members, Ali or Alen, can drop a link in the chat so you can see it. What's coming now is that we're going to be adding many more question types. We're going to support form attachment so you can use it with CSVs and entity lists. And then the coming release of Central, which should be coming out hopefully about 2-ish weeks, depending on how QA goes and regression testing goes. You'll be able to try the new web forms library and engine on your own forms. We're also going to add a page to the ODK website where you can upload your own XLS form and try it out and offer feedback. So by the end of this year, at least the initial cut of web forms will be out for folks. Sam has asked a great question that I see in the chat. Will web forms eventually replace ODK Collect? I don't know. I mean, that'd be amazing if we just had one web forms engine to deal with, like logistically and all those kinds of things. But I think the use cases are like slightly different. Like an enumerator mediated data collection campaign is a lot different than like a self-report, like a Google Forms or like a SurveyMonkey style thing. But one hope that we do have is that that core engine could be embedded in Collect and in an iOS client and web browsers. So, if the engine continues to make as good progress as it's done, the web forms engine, I can imagine it being the core engine, essentially replacing Java Rosa and being used everywhere. But our goal overall is just to make sure that the experience of filling out a form is the same on a mobile device, whether or not you're using an iPhone, Android phone, or desktop, that is the same experience. Yes, so that's web forms. I'll come back to the questions in the deck. Central, so the Central server, in this coming release, we will enable being able to create and update offline entities. So that'll be coming in Central. If you're using ODK Cloud, this will just magically appear on your instance, so you don't have to upgrade it. It'll just happen. Submission deletion, a feature that I personally care about and love, that I've been complaining about for a long time, but finally I got enough points to be able to push that up. So that's coming both via API. And then we're testing a whole new user management flow. This is part of what Ali was talking about. We want to release things, see how people adopt it and make adjustments. So just figuring out how we can improve user management in Central is coming as well. So there's a navigation and draft redesign that's coming as well. So stay tuned for that. That's what we'll be working on next. Okay. Collect, our old friend Collect. So offline entities, we've been talking about offline entities. That's coming in the next release. It's going to need a form update, and it's going to need the new version of Central, but it's coming very soon. Increasing entity performance. We know, once we ship entities, people are like, this is fantastic, but I want to collect data on 1 million things. It's like, okay, well, 1 million is a big number. So we're expecting that entity performance is something that we're investing in. We're hoping that the next release will be able to get you hundreds of thousands of entities. It just depends on the shape, but we're making great strides there. The counter widget we just talked about is coming, and then the Buddhist calendar is coming. So that will add, I think we have the Bikram Sambat, we have the Arabic calendar, we have the Ethiopian calendar. So more calendars for those who are collecting data in places that don't use the Gregorian calendar. Selects, people don't think about this, but a lot of questions in ODK are selects. And so we've really invested in making that experience better. And so look at that beautiful select. Look at that, the rounded edges. It's like Steve Jobs himself came back from the dead and like really worked on that. So just better. Is that morbid? I don't know. Just better selects because it's just like it's more comfortable. It's like comfortable shoes. We've got comfortable selects. Being able to display media in the summary. So in the summary view, when you edit a form, that vertical view, we're going to do things like show you the pictures that you're seeing, the location information. So all that non-textual data will be better, more easily viewable there. And then the last one, something that folks really want is being able to edit submissions on your device. So when a data collector typically sends data to the server, they can't edit it, right? Only a project manager can edit it. Well, you will soon be able to, this will be off by default. You'll be able to enable so that your data collectors, as long as they have the submissions on the device still, they can edit that submission and send that edit back to the central server. Central will keep both versions, and you'll be able to see the difference between those two. So that's what we have coming. Next slide, please. All right. Why isn't ODK done? Do we just like writing code? Well, this is a very common question. When I started the project 16 years ago, I thought like, okay, how much data collection software can run right? Like a year, 2 years, we'll be done. We can all move on to our lives, we can take more naps. No, it's 16 years later, we're still working on it. The first thing you have to understand is that there's always ongoing maintenance to keep ODK working, especially the mobile client, which is in the Play Store. Google constantly changes APIs, locks it down to make things more secure. And so we always have to be updating the software just to keep it in the Play Store. So that's why we always have a lot of maintenance, just software changes involved. You all are never happy with what we give you. We give you entities, you want offline entities. We want entities in space. We want entities on the ground. Okay, fine. So users they want more capabilities in systems that they trust and they're familiar with. Right? They don't, they know how ODK works. They trust it. They've trained their data collectors. And so more functionality that we can add provides an outsized value. So that's why we keep working on it. And then the last thing is really important is that it's really hard to get adoption of these tools in areas like Rwanda, Ecuador. So ODK has a large install base, millions of people in literally every country. And so if we can ship something, and most of them are working on like social impact. So if you can ship one thing that makes those people's lives easier, we just get more good stuff in the world. And so it's really important for us, as long as folks are using it and finding value, we want to build those features and get them added to ODK. So that's why we keep working on it. If somebody emails me and said like, you're satisfied with everything, that it's like done, we can stop. But I don't think anybody's going to email me. So we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. I know I've gone 2 minutes long, but I'll open up the floor now and maybe try to address some of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat. Some people like the Steve Jobs joke. Fantastic. I see Ellen's been answering a question. So any questions that Ellen has not answered in the chat that folks want to answer? Yeah. People are excited about deletion. That's great. Amit asked, is there a possibility for bulk approval? I think bulk operations are a gap in Central right now. It's something that we want to take a look at. It's probably in the user library that is not currently public. But yes, it's something that we want to take on. And so if you can provide more feedback to Alen, that would be helpful. Eduardo has some issues about deployment time of forms. Dan is exactly right. If you have sort of support questions, please do drop those into the forum and provide a little bit more context so we can understand exactly what is happening here. Okay. Sam has a great question. Web forms are a bit early stage for contribution. I think so. I think the web forms right now like things are still being flushed out, and so it's moving a little quickly. But I think where it would be super helpful is that folks who are collecting geospatial data on the web forms or folks who are editing geospatial data, we're going to need some sort of focused feedback on that as we progress. So stay tuned for that. So we'll reach out at that time. So again, a lot of the core team are here. So if you have questions for QA, if you have questions for the central team, if you have questions for, well, the collect team, I see Jagosh here. If you have questions for Alen, and now it's a great time to ask it. Agree with you, Joseph. There's a ton happening on the project. And there's even more. There's a lot. Vincent had a question on editing sent forms. Yes, editing the audit trail, however you define audit trail, will be kept. So on the central side, you see just like when you edit data in central, and you see that diff that shows you like, Bob sent data at this time and then Sally edited it, in this way. All those edits will be seen on the central side just as normal. And again, this is an opt-in feature. There's some projects where editing is really important. There's some projects where you definitely don't want enumerators to edit the data after it's been sent. So there'll be options there. Hobson, are we revisiting the submission listing interface in Central for pagination or any other way to deal with thousands of submissions? No comment at the time.
I think
this time?
pagination is coming too. I don't want to make,
Kathleen,
stay
you don't
tuned
want
for
to get in trouble
pagination.
with your fellow teammates.
With myself, yeah, Matt's not here.
You don't want to get in trouble with yourself. It's like pagination. Oh, that's coming. Oh, wait, I'm building pagination.
I'm working on submission deletion and offline entities. So yeah, lots of things to work on.
It sounds like Kathleen is promising that it's coming. We have a great question from the QA team. What is the most difficult bug that you found? So I don't know if Shimon or Dominica want to respond to that.
Well, yeah, for us, bugs are fun. So, that's our testing perspective. Finding bugs, it's our goal. So maybe we have a bit different perspective. For me, the most important or the most interesting things are when there are 3-4 factors combining and I can't find it. It takes me some time. So I like these. And there might be other perspective where trying to fix it takes some time and we need to test again and again to find a way. So for me, the fun part is, challenge. So many factors combining to find the bug. Yeah.
Shimon, anything you want to add to that?
It's hard for me to think about one concrete bug. It was really a lot of them in a different area of the applications, like some bugs with the camera, some with the maps. So I don't have one in my mind right now, but probably there is a really lot of funny things that users doesn't encounter in the application. So
I remember one fun one. It was from the forum. It involved swiping to one question, precise question. There needs to be a specific theme in the device, and you need to rotate the device, I think, and then you got the bug. So it was really hard to find it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I remember you
fantastic.
saying something about rotating the slide. I remember that from somewhere. But thank you for sharing the stories.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really great about the QA team is that, you know, they're involved at the very early stages as we're designing it. And so they have just, it's not just like we build something and then we hand it to QA. They're involved the whole process, and that really drives the, I think, the robustness of ODK. The other thing you should know is that, you know, ODK works on like 22,000 different devices, you know, so, and some of them are very low quality. And so the way that it gets robust is, you know, QA trying all sorts of crazy stuff to break it, you know? I see a question from Pencho. I see this quote, storing blobs outside of the database issue was in progress for a while. I wonder if it's coming soon. Yes. Right now, all blobs, binary blobs, are stored in the database, in the Postgres database, which is fine for a lot of projects and not so fine for others. And so, yes, we do have a feature coming in the next coming release of Central, hopefully in about 2-ish weeks. That will migrate those blobs from the database onto S3 compatible storage. This is something that, like, I don't know, if you care about it, if it's DevOps kinds of things, but yes, that is coming. And so only your textual data will be stored in the database, and then everything else can be stored on S3. So that is coming very, very soon. It's in progress for a while. Should I take personal offense? It was in progress for as long as necessary to guarantee the robustness of the feature and to ship all the other stuff that people want. Yeah, some of these features are really long, take a long time, and they're complex because they can't fail. Like, we're migrating your data from a database to a store, which may or may not, and not just S3, any S3 compatible storage, like DigitalOcean stuff and MinIO and these kinds of things. So it just has to be really robust and stable. And so we poke at it a lot, and we try not to ship things that are not, you know, stable and working well. So sometimes it can take a long time. Oh my gosh, Ali, you didn't warn me. We're 2 minutes over. So
This is my warning.
This is your warning. Okay. Next steps. If you have like future topic ideas for insiders calls, yeah, please do share it with us, and we're glad to add it. If you want to do a lightning talk, you're always welcome. We're always looking for new speakers, and the next call will be on October 2nd. And so be sure to keep an eye out for that. So we don't have a ton of time left. In fact, we have -2 minutes. So I want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. I think there's about 30 of you who showed up today, which is really fantastic. It's one of the joys of being involved in this project is seeing like so many cool people take time out of their day to learn a little bit more about other people's projects and some of the features that we have coming. Your feedback is really essential because we're building this stuff for you. So thank you so much. Have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, and happy data collection. Do we still say that? I think we still say that. Happy data collection, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you so much.